During the time that the squadron had been fighting in the Syrian campaign, the Afrika Korps had maintained a continuous siege against isolated Tobruk. 3 squadron were involved in air cover for resupply missions going into Tobruk.
What we used to do, we'd cover the men and then we'd circle around till they got out again. Actually, one day took in the commanding officer of Middle East into Trimble. I'm not too sure of the plane he went in now, but we were close cover. I was within 100 yards of him and he gave me the thumbs up sign. He was in there for about, he couldn't have been more than an hour because we only had 3 hours fuel, and then we escorted him out again without incident. Nothing happened. We didn't have to do anything but just take him in and bring him out. The supplies most of the time came by ship, and we'd go out into the Gulf and sit over the top of the ships as they were approaching Tobruk, because they were very susceptible to being dive bombed then there. We'd sit out as long as we could and then have to go home. And I think half the time the Jerrys were watching, send the planes in as soon as we leave. Then they put long-range tanks on. We had to go out and help escort the Navy into Malta. And that was a very long trip. We put these tanks, the belly tanks, I call them, and when they were empty, you just drop them. Use those up first. And we could do about an hour over the top of the ships. That seemed to be pretty effective. Once again, I think as soon as we left, we'd come in from the main and Italy, and but while we were there, they stayed away. That's when Malta was being very badly bombed.
And Tobruk was being replenished with ammunition and whatnot by the Royal Navy, which was towing barges into Tobruk every night and taking them out by night. They'd about reached Saloum, which was the border, if you like, going into Tobruk. By nightfall, they'd be towed in, and then the ones that were emptied would be brought out and then about reach Saloum again, dawn. Well, we did a lot of escort or cover of these barges from City Anish, and for that purpose we developed a new formation again, which was called the Weaving Pairs Formation, which was a little bit copied from the Germans in that the aircraft flew in pairs, but at different heights like this, and everyone was weaving, except the leader. He flew straight. Someone had to know where they were going. And we had the swingers, one up there, one down there and one up there. And we did a lot of this work. Sometimes the 109s would come out, but if we stayed over the things we were supposed to protect, they wouldn't attack us. Sometimes they did, but generally they didn't. sometimes there'd be naval ships that we'd have to protect, but you couldn't fly over them because the Navy would shoot at anything that came over it. Sometimes we'd do a patrol, just an offensive patrol out past Tobruk. Sometimes we'd escort bombers out on a bombing raid near Tobruk.
In the Allied Operation Crusader, to relieve Tobruk, air supremacy was contested between 19 Allied squadrons against a combined force of 19 Italian Squad Wrigley and 9 German Staffeln. In all, 228 Allied aircraft were fighting 258 Axis aircraft on the last day of November 1941. On that same day, a 109 flown by Oberfeldwebel Otto Schulz, attached to Staffel 2 JG-27, crippled Sergeant Tiny Cameron's Tomahawk, and this forced him to land behind enemy lines. Within minutes, Pete Jeffrey had followed him down, picked him up, and had taken off for home. This heroic act helped the wing commander win yet another decoration, the Distinguished Service Order. By early December 1941, 3 Squadron was the first in the Desert Air Force to be re-equipped with the new Curtiss P-40E Kittyhawk. These aircraft had superior firepower than the Tomahawks, 6 wing-mounted 0.5-inch Browning machine guns, and were equally robust, ideal for desert warfare.
It was the warhorse of the Air Force amongst fighter bombers. Like the Dakota was for transport, it was a fantastic aircraft. Dakar still flying around the place. But the Kitty, as a fighter bomber, was good. But as a fighter, the 109 was much better, and the Mackie was the same thing. But I think our pilots were better pilots than the other people. To survive, wouldn't have survived otherwise.
In the air, the Kittyhawk Mark Is coped well with most of the enemy aircraft they met. They could turn tightly, but the lack of a supercharger was a distinct disadvantage against the Bf 109 F2s, which were then appearing in the desert skies in increasing numbers.
I was still a sergeant. I never even got 5 sergeant. But it didn't matter. In the Air Force, rank didn't mean anything. It was experience. And by this time, I was getting reasonably experienced. So they put me in charge of the wing. I learnt later that I was the only sergeant ever put in charge of a wing. Anyway, we went to an advanced airstrip or airdrome. And I had 8 planes from my squadron, and the other squadron had 12. There were 20 of us altogether. So when we were sitting on the ground waiting for takeoff time, well, when we were what we'd call the scramble, because enemy aircraft were coming in. And the call came, and I'd spoken to the CO, or leader of the other. I said, I'll let you take off first, because the wind was coming in one direction, and I will take off crosswind with 8. You go off first, and your dust will go away. Just circle once, and I'll be underneath you. And then I'll go above you. Anyway, he took off, didn't wait. We took off, and I climbed up. There was cloud cover at about 11,000 feet. It was light, wispy cloud, but just enough that you couldn't see through it. And I was climbing up. I thought I could see a shadow on it. And we'd always been taught that wherever there were the Stukas, where they're coming in, the dive bombers, wherever they are around, there's usually fighters sitting above them to protect them. And as once again experience, I'm going up towards the clouds. I could nearly smell them there. And one of my crowd, he said something about the fight is down below. I just ignored him. just, I'd hardly had the words, heard that, and out of the crowd came 6 109s. And we were heading up towards them, luckily. We'd have been going down towards the Stukas, they'd have got all of us. It seems a strange thing to say, but a plane going up is a very steady platform for firing. A plane coming down at you is turning, and it's not as steady. And I was able to lift my sights, and I had a good shot at the leader, and then had a go at a second one. That day we shot down between the two squadrons. I think it was either 18 or 19, and we had one bullet hole in one aircraft. And I got 2 109s and damaged a couple. When we got back to the squadron, we were being debriefed. I said, I thought I got one and damaged a couple. And my number 2 said, well, you got more, you got 2. He said, the very first one that came in, you shot at, he kept going. He went straight in. I must have shot the pilot.
Of the new arrivals to 3 Squadron was the Australian National Rugby Union player, Flying Officer Nicky Barr, destined to eventually destroy more enemy aircraft than any other pilot in the squadron. Just a few days after joining the squadron, he brought down a Messerschmitt 110, and the very next day, a second 110 and a Ju-88. On the 13th of December, Tommy Trimble would become yet another victim of German ace, Hans-Joachim Marseille, on a mission out to Martuba, just northwest of Tobruk.
The weather was moving westward, so that it had just about reached the Gulf of Bomba, moving west. We were told that we were going out at less than squadron strength. We'd do just one sweep over that area and we'd come home because we were going as less than a squadron. On the way out, I could see streams of bombers coming back. Streams of bombers escorted by fighters. And every now and again you'd see 109s attacking them. But we were cunning, we stayed well to one side. And they wouldn't attack us because we were just fighters and we weren't going to do any damage. And we went out and we came in over the Gulf of Bomba, and there we started to run into wispy cloud. And it was sort of darkish because of, the cloud wasn't darkish, but the light was darkish because of all the cloud that was about. Beautiful. Oh, I don't know if you've ever flown through wispy cloud, you know, a wisp here and then a bit of clearance and a wisp there. Glorious. And anyway, we came over this El Machiba. We were told that there'd be no fighters. The German Air Force would have gone right back to Benghazi. I had never seen so many aircraft on the ground in all my life. Have you ever looked down on top of an ant's nest? Not these little black ants, but the big... Well, that's what it looked like. And I thought, God, we'd lost a couple of blokes from the flight just getting in there, getting in that far because of the cloud and various other reasons. By this time, I'd been leading the left-hand section, which normally was 4, but it was down to 1, down to myself at this stage. Flying around a bit, eventually, I nearly collided with a Tomahawk and a 109. I don't know which one was following which, but I fired at both of them anyway. And then eventually I saw another Tomahawk being chased by a 109 up there. And I thought, I've got to knock that 109 down. And I flew up towards him. And as I flew up towards him, I looked back, and down there is another 109, really pulling round hard. I looked at him, and he fired. And he had one of the new 109s, which had a cannon firing through the centre of the air screw spinner. And I saw the beautiful rounds going out like that. But back here, you see, I told you that gravity is working at the rate of 32 feet per second, so everything you fire takes a path like that. And I saw this beautiful stream, and it was way underneath me. It wasn't going to hit me. And I thought, oh, he won't hit me. And I'm aiming at these blokes. And then he put another burst out, and it's still a fair bit away from me, but as it got closer, I could see it was going to hit. And I turned my head away, and I'm still trying to shoot at this bloke up here, and all of a sudden I felt thump, thump. 2 explosive rounds hit me. Well, my feet was knocked off the pedal. I'll tell you more about it. I felt one round hit just under the tailplane, and when that hit me, it caused me to slightly bunt. And then a 4th round hit. Now, I've got a model of an aeroplane there to show you, but I had the canopy halfway back, and I didn't have my goggles on because it was hard to see in the conditions. Canopy was halfway back because I'd been flying partly in rain, and I wanted to be able to see out to the sides. And the 4th round just hit the top bow, the front bow, and it put a little dent in it like that. That round was a 20mm that exploded, and my head was only about that far away from it. And the hole there is gradually closed up. But various things happened all at once. My head was filled with fragments. These 2 rounds burst the fuel lines of the engine and ignited the fuel, which came up through the cockpit. So the cockpit's burning. My windscreen was blown out, blown away from the top bow, and it curled. Fortunately, it curled forward like this because it was held at the bottom. The armour-plated glass in front, which in the Tomahawk was separate from the windscreen, was behind it, because it was an afterthought by the Americans when they sold them to England. And by curling out like that, have you ever seen a ship's bridge where they have something to keep the air going like that? Well, you see. Anyway, I immediately knew that I'd have to get out because the aeroplane was burning. So I went to undo my strap, pull the pin out. And at that instant, I became unconscious. But just before I became unconscious, I thought, oh, thank goodness, I'll be dead before I hit. I won't feel it, you see. That's what I thought. Anyway, I'm lying there and burning. My face is just burning, cooking. Only this much, only that much, because I got my helmet down to there and my oxygen mask here with the microphone. So my eyes are just cooked. Everything's cooking up here. And of course the flame is burning my gloves, but I always wore leather gloves, you see. So all that was happening was the gloves were shrinking a bit. And then all of a sudden I woke up. Oh, sorry. As this happened, the stick had come back, the airplane had flicked, and I was spinning. When I came to, I became scared. I thought, geez, I'm not going to be dead. I'm going to feel all of this. I got out of the spin. Well, the flame is starting to die down because, you see, all that happened was that the fuel lines were cut, and the explosion of the explosive rounds had ignited the petrol, but once that was finished, the flame had gone out. So I got the thing out of a spin, but my eyes, this eye was closed completely, and this one was nearly closed, but I managed to squeeze it open, and I saw the Gulford bomber was out on my left, and therefore I was heading south, which was better than flying into the sea. And then I realised that I was going straight down. Having come out of the spin, I'm still going down. And I thought, geez, you know, I was only a couple of thousand feet when I was hit. So if I pull it out, if I pull the aircraft out of this dive, I mightn't fly into the ground. Well, I pulled it out of the dive and I still hadn't hit the ground. And my eye closed up, so I'm blind now, but I can feel things. And so I pulled the airplane up until it just started to reach its stalling speed, because you can feel all these things. And then I put the nose down a little bit till I built up speed and went like that. And eventually I felt the air screw hit the ground and I just flattened it out and skidded to a stop.
As injured as he was, Tommy managed to avoid the enemy and was found by Arabs who facilitated his return to the Allies. Hitler's Operation Barbarossa, the offensive against the Russians since the 22nd of June, was diverting Germany's supplies away from the Middle East. Consequently, this was giving the Allied forces time to regroup and re-equip, particularly now that the Americans were manufacturing more and more aircraft, a lot of which were gradually finding their way to North Africa. An important innovation for temporary airstrips was being developed at this time, the Marston mat. Rather than an airstrip of cleared sandy desert floor, the Marston mat was a hard metal surface that made takeoff and landing much more efficient and safer.
It's pressed out metal. It's got about 3-inch diameter holes, and it's nearly 1/4 inch thick. I tell you, it'll take you all your time to lift one. 2 blokes or 3 blokes used to have to put it together. And I think it was about 6 or 8 foot long, about 15 inches wide. And it was perforated with these holes to keep it light, you know. You just couldn't have a flat piece of metal, that's no good. And then on the edges, it had like a sort of a key, like a finger like that, and it'd lock into the next one. And I just used to push them together like that. And they'd stay there, because to pull them pieces, you had to pull them out this way. And you just put one in, one after the other. But it was fantastic stuff.
Early January 1942, the squadron shot down 12 enemy aircraft. Another 7 probably destroyed, and 6 more damaged. On the 11th, Nicky Barr shot down a G-50 and 2 Bf-109Fs before his Kittyhawk was hit and crash-landed behind enemy lines. Disregarding a wounded leg, he spent the next 3 days disguised as a desert nomad, riding a camel past German motorized units and gathering vital information about the enemy on his way back to base. After his intelligence report, he was immediately awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for his actions. Rommel had commenced a strong counterattack by January 23rd, and the squadron's advance party at Belander was almost caught when they awoke to find a semicircle of Panzer tanks firing at them from only 300 yards away. Corporal Lee, the NCO in charge, ran to a truck 50 yards away and raced south, collecting his men on the way as the Panzers blew up a nearby petrol tanker. Ground fog hid the escaping truck, and by jettisoning everything not screwed down to gain speed, they survived. 3 Squadron, along with number 450, another Kittyhawk squadron, retreated eastwards to Gambut and continued to fly patrols against the enemy in conjunction with RAF number 112, Shark Squadron. Hans-Joachim Marseille brought down 2 of 3 squadron's Kittyhawks on the 15th of February, killing Sergeant Reed and injuring Pilot Officer P.J. Tommy Briggs, who bailed out at an altitude of just 100 metres. Bobby Gibbs, promoted to squadron leader, became the commanding officer of the squadron on the 26th of February 1942. He arranged the squadron's first escort assignment for some recently arrived Douglas Boston light bombers, which commenced bombing the enemy at Martuba on March the 14th. By the time 3 Squadron was given 14 days stand down on the 25th of March, they'd claimed 68.5 enemy aircraft destroyed, 59 damaged, and been credited with 16 probables in a little over 6 months. On the 7th of April, the squadron began 3 weeks of intensive training to prepare for a new campaign in which the Kittyhawks would play the role of fighter bombers. At this time, Marshal Hermann Goering withdrew much needed air power from the Russian front to double his force in the Mediterranean. While Rommel commenced his Battle of Gazala on the night of the 25th of May 1942, with intensive night bombing and strafing of the Allied forward landing grounds. His land assault started the next morning with 4 Italian divisions, the German 15th and 21st Panzers and 90th Light Divisions, attacking the Allied line from Gazala south to Bir Hachem.
And then all of a sudden there's 250 German tanks had broken through the line, and we sent our aircraft bombing and dive bombing and machine gunning them, and in one particular day we did 68 sorties or attacks the one day on the German tanks and their transport, and were very successful. But gee whiz, and back behind them further again they had another 400 tanks coming through with 1,200 transport. So we had a big front coming through, and there was no alternative. We had to start thinking about retreating and getting back to another advanced landing ground. These advanced landing grounds are only a strip of a flat desert, and they put some 44-gallon drums at each end of them, and that's your landing ground. That's your strip. You landed straight on the sand or the desert. The sandy desert there was a gravelly sort of stuff, so it wasn't bad to land aircraft on. So anyway, we retreated out of there. We just got out of there in time. We stayed back and we threw some enemy bombs that were there. We just laid them all over the landing strip, so we thought that might hold them up a bit from landing an aircraft there anyway. It wouldn't make much difference to the tanks. And then we scattered a few of our bombs around which we couldn't carry. We had some bombs in the bomb truck, and the ammo truck was okay. And then the personnel truck, we only had the 3 trucks in the armoured section. I drove the personnel truck. They'd say, okay, the retreat's on, we'll get the aircraft serviced straight away, and the pilots would say, well, we're going to fly back to El Ghazala or some Gambit or one of the other landing grounds we'd been at on the way up. So they'd say, well, we're going to make for that, and our other flight would probably be there. We had 2 flights, and when we advanced, we'd leapfrog over like that. And so Sea Flight were probably back there. We didn't know where they were. We didn't know where the base was or where Sea Flight were half the time, because communications there weren't any. And so the pilots, we'd get them off the ground, and any aircraft that was unserviceable and couldn't be shifted, well, we'd just destroy. And although one of our fitters at one stage, he got an aircraft going, and he flew it back to the next advanced ground. But he was an engine fitter. He's a very experienced guy, and he thought, oh, I'm not leaving my bloody plane here. So he's off. He got in it, and he took off, and he took it back to the next drone. He knew where the drone was, and he just had to follow the coast along. That retreat now, that wasn't although we came back a fair way. We came back past Trebuk, Sidi Barani, Saloom Pass, and now that's another story. Coming down these passes, there were 3 passes along that coastline. On one particular occasion, we had to come down the pass. Now, these passes were a death trap, really, because the Germans, especially when there's a retreat on, they were They were flying and observing everything. And now observing in the desert's dead easy, because one truck just ploughing through the desert, the dust trail that it leaves can be identified from the air from thousands of feet up. And you got no cover, you haven't got anything. They can just come down and strafe you and bomb you. There's nothing you can do. You can keep driving, or you can pull up and just run away from your vehicle and lay on the ground. Anyway, we came down this pass, and you've only got to go down the pass once to see all the vehicles that have been strafed and been pushed over the side of the road and roll down. It's about 1,100 foot drop in 2 miles. You come down these passes, and they were built by the Italians, and they come round like this. And it's just a single road, and you got to take a correct lock on your truck, or you got to stop them back and mess around. So they were fairly well built originally, but they'd been bombed and strafed and bombed that much that they were pretty rough and rugged when we came down them.
I imagine you were travelling in a pretty low gear.
Oh yeah, you'd have to stay in very low gear because the steepness of the decline and the fact that you had to stay on it, because if you go off the edges, you're likely to hit a mine. You either hit an S mine or a ratchet mine, and that's another story I'll tell you about mines later. So you had to stick to the middle of the road, and if you transgressed off the side of the road, you could hit a mine. And they were aware of this when they set their mines, just the likely places you're likely to go off the edge of the road. And that's why whenever we passed anybody, we'd pass them that close. And sometimes we might even knock a bit of it with the trucks. And so you didn't like getting off the road at any time. So coming down this pass, and with the German aircraft in the vicinity, it was a pretty scary operation, because you were shot halfway down there. It's no good jumping out. You can't run anywhere because it's drop off each side. You'd be up against the cliff on this side, but over the other side you just drop away, and you'd see trucks and stuff that had all been shot up and bombed, and they'd just been shoved off the road by the tanks, and they just rolled down the bottom. So we never ever liked the coast road or these passes. There was Hellfire Pass, Saloon Pass and Derna Pass. There's 3 big ones, and gee whiz, they took a heavy toll on transport trying to get up and down there, because the Germans knew them well, and they were always waiting to strafe or bomb them, especially when there's a retreat on, because when a retreat on, there's nothing really organised about it, because all your trucks are nose to tail going down that coast road. So we used to stay in the desert wherever we could. We reckon we were a lot safer up in the desert, well out, away from that coast road. And even though you left dust trails, at least you could scatter. And we used to scatter our trucks right out, never follow well behind one another, not unless we were absolutely positive we were safe.
Thanks for watching part 2 of 3 Squadron in World War II. Be sure to tune into the next episode as we continue the story of 3 Squadron in the North African campaign.